Next, we have number 5, which is a presentation by the Department of Corrections.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, Mr. Bob Sleppy is here from the California Department of Rehabilitation or Corrections and Rehabilitation. Excuse me. He's going to talk about a project that's being considered by the state of California, and you've started that process and been engaging with the community. So, turn it over to you, sir.
And staff, I'm Bob Sleppy with the Department of Corrections and Rehabilitation. I'm directing our environmental review process for something called our Level 2 infill project. I want to take you through just some real quick slides talking about where the department's kind of going and been and where we're headed on this project. The department has had a lot of challenges for many, many years. You know, most notably overcrowding, mental health problems with care of inmates. We, about a year ago, got together with the Department of Finance and the Governor's Office and came up with something called the Blueprint. And we don't need to go in detail here, but it's very comprehensive. It's on our website, covers us a lot of issues. I mean, court orders about overcrowding, court orders about mental health treatment, things like that. But out of that comes, in particular, for this community and for other in California, a concept that we foresee now that we're going to need more beds for lower classification inmates. The prisons we have out here at Vacaville, most notably is a level 3. It's kind of a medium security prison, cell type housing units. We're projecting, because we anticipate changing our classification system, we're going to end up with more level 2 inmates. Level 2 inmates are distinguished from a housing standpoint specifically by being in a dormitory setting instead of a celled housing unit. They still have all the same security perimeter, but they're in a little more to a room. So we want to talk about that project a little bit, because once we identified the need for level 2 beds, the legislature went ahead and passed Senate Bill 1022 last year as part of the Budget Act, and that bill said Department of Corrections are authorized to pursue the construction of about 2,300 new level 2 beds. We had volunteered that we would take an existing housing unit that we use at one of our prisons, so we wouldn't start over with a brand new housing unit. That's kind of an 800-bed module. And the legislature helpfully told us where we could consider building them. And this is kind of a math issue in a presentation. They identified 7 prisons statewide that they felt we could consider for sites for these level 2 additional facilities. And they're infill because we're going to just add a little unit to an existing prison. We're not building a whole new prison with a new warden and a new chief deputy. We're just adding on a little standalone module that's operated by the respective prison. But in Vacaville, as an example, as is Folsom, there's 2 prisons side by side. So actually, it turns out we end up with only 5 buildable sites between the 7.
Bob, is this one for each of the 5 facilities, or is it one that could go to any one of the 5?
Yes, and I'm going to get to the fact that we're doing an equal treatment EIR. Okay. Though we do have proposed projects, we're going to treat all of them equally, because they've all got some winning quality and some constraint. So where they're spread out. There's one up at Folsom, between Folsom and Sac. There's one between Vacaville and CMF. There's one down in Chino. There's one way down on the San Diego at the southern border of the state, R.J. Donovan. And there's one up at Mule Creek, which is in a prison in the community of Ione and Amador County. This is an important separation among these sites, in that we were told by the legislature to pick our favorites, pick the ones that we're going to come out and call our proposed sites. So we did a little evaluation, and we picked a 1,500-bed prototypical for our Mule Creek site up in Ione, and a 800-bed prototypical down in RJD in San Diego. So these are our proposed sites. But we are going to do equal treatment of the 3 alternatives, which includes Vacaville, CIM down in Chino, and Folsom. So we're doing an equal treatment, but these are the 2 at the top there are our proposed project sites.
Mitch, excuse me, Bob.
Sorry to interrupt your flow.
Sure, no, it's fine.
Real quick question. When you say an equal treatment, are you seeking then you are currently seeking an approved EIR now for those sites?
Yes, I'm going to get to that right at the end. We are just starting our CEQA process, and we want to make sure all 5 communities knew that we're going to, even though we have the 2 proposed sites.
2, you're actually going to build one, but you want an entitlement to be able to build one here at some point in time, should you choose?
No, we're only going to come out of this with the authority for up to 2,300 beds. So we're going to pick either 3 800 beds or 1 800 bed and a 1,500 bed. We won't have any more authority after that to build any extra.
I understand you won't have any authority from the state, but you would still have an EIR should the state then pass another Senate bill that entitles you to build on that site, correct?
Conceivably, yes. We wouldn't go ahead and approve those, but you'd have an EIR on the shelf that tells you what would be the consequences.
Anytime you just need some more beds. Okay.
Yep.
Thank you.
So here's the particulars. We would not do more than 1,500 beds in one of these. We would do no less than about 792 beds. We have a total authority for 2,376 beds. We have a total authority of $810 million to build those. They're prisons. They're similar to what you have here in your community, 24 hours a day operation, visiting hours restricted. Economically, this site, because it only supports the 800 bed, is about 190 new jobs. We've seen in our prison system a significant reduction in our population and staffing throughout the state following the penal code changes that are called realignment. This facility, medical facilities, dropped about 200 jobs, 200 staff, 200 inmates, excuse me. And Solano has dropped about 900 inmates in the last year. We're seeing this downward trend as we get fewer inmates coming into the system from the courts. So in some cases, we're starting off with these facilities being considerably smaller than they were just a year ago. We're using a standard prototype. We've already got someplace in the state. We didn't want to start from scratch. We wanted to use something we know works, and this is a facility down in Corcoran, one of our prisons down there. But we're going to try to stick to this footprint. And once again, these are dormitories. The little crosshatches are dormitories. They're not celled type, and that means pretty much you're going to use that lower classification. You're not going to put high security inmates in that setting. Here in Vacaville, we've found a little place between the two prisons. We did a lot of work when we were looking at the reentry facility, so we took advantage of that work and some of the work the receiver did when they were proposing a full facility here. So we found an area between the two prisons. We haven't decided which prison would operate it. We do believe that the access would be through Solano because they've already got an established entrance that works pretty well. But that's where it would land. This is very preliminary planning, but that's.
You couldn't take it back over more to the west and in back of that other building, huh? See where you've got it now. You just right in almost in the front yard of those homes along Peabody Road. Because
of the soil's pretty not very good to the kind of southwest of the medical facility. We didn't want to try building there, and we just finished the 64-bed mental health facility, and that kind of used up. So right now, we had looked for the reentry up to the north there a little bit, but I think right now this is the only 35-acre footprint that we could find. So. Security. So our middle name when it comes to running prisons, this is going to have all the same security measures as any prison we have in California. Just because it's level 2, it doesn't have a lower perimeter and a security system. It has the same lethal electrified fence, double perimeter fences, sally ports, all that kind of stuff. It would be standalone. It wouldn't be contiguous to the other prisons in terms of the perimeter, but it would be a very secure facility. These are major construction projects. The 800 bed is about $270 million in total construction cost. The 1,500 bed is closer to $530 million in construction costs. These are both design-build projects, which means we have the ability to get them done a little more quickly because you get the designers and the contractors in one contract, and you tend to move along pretty quickly. We had experience with this in Stockton, and it's been very successful with our new medical facility we're building in Stockton. A couple years to build it. We have an end date that we have to meet, and that's that when we get these activated, hopefully before the end of 2016, we close our oldest level 2 prison. We have a level 2 prison down in Norco, California, in Riverside County, which is sort of an old military hospital base. Really never meant to be a true prison. We make it work, but it's very expensive to maintain, and we've been directed to close it to reduce our overall costs. There's always, when we build one new bed, for every one new bed, we pay the community $800 per that one bed. About the time we start construction, that's split between the superintendent of schools and the community for capital improvements. So it's about $600,000.
Mr. Mayor, can I ask a question on that? Is that a new concept?
No, it's been around for quite a while.
Okay,
it used to be expressed.
I'm not aware that the 64-bed expansion ever provided any funding locally. In fact, the applicable impact fees weren't paid. So I would want to
explain that to you
Okay,
later.
separately?
Yeah,
Okay.
if that's okay.
Sure.
This is important for especially a community where the prison could be sited. We are doing equal level treatment. Now, we weren't not thinking about trying to entitle all the sites. We were trying to make sure when we come back to our secretary, who heads our department, that he could see all the choices and not be biased, just because we started off with the 2 proposed sites. So we are doing an equal level of treatment. Your city, your planning folks put together a very nice comment letter, which I've got copies for you if you didn't get one. You guys put together, I think you got the prize for the most thorough letter of anybody that responded to us.
How good our people are.
Yeah, no, really, it's a good, well done letter. I appreciate it. And it got in on time. So that's how we're doing this. We're in this process. We just completed the notice of preparation process. We're just starting into preparing the draft EIR. Draft EIR would be out in kind of latter part of spring, early summer, and we'd be headed towards approval by the end of the year. EIR is going to touch all those typical topics you get into in an EIR, depending on each site. Some sites have issues, some sites don't, but it's a full analysis EIR. Here's our posted schedule for now. But the big thing is we're coming back here for public hearings when the EIR is available, and town halls if we need to do those. We'd be looking to take it to our secretary in the fall for approval. We would bring to him, all these equal analysis to say which one do you want to go with. We appreciate any chance to come talk. I just wanted to briefly introduce Deborah Heisen, who's our Deputy Director for our Facility and Construction Office here. She is the person who makes these things happen, along with Chris Meyer in our office. She's not going to say a few words. So that's the end of our presentation, and we'll take questions.
I would just like to make a statement. I first ran for office in Vacaville in 1987 when I was a candidate for a school board seat. And I've walked many other elections since, not only my own, but others. And we have a lot of correctional officers that have homes here that are part of this community. And we've always enjoyed a really terrific relationship with the prison, as far as I know. It would be welcome if we were a little higher on the pecking order on it. I know we aren't, but I just wanted to put in a word for your employees because they're really outstanding people and they do a great job for us.
Thank you. We always appreciate that.
Anybody else? Oh, Mitch.
I was going to defer to Laura first. Her question is.
I'm not involved in the day-to-day on this, and the letter that we prepared was based on a previous proposal that the state had been looking at, so we picked up from there. What kind of a public notification process do you use to let the residents know, and how far of a radius noticing do you apply? Because I understand you had a scoping meeting here in January and may not have been very well attended. How did the word get out on that?
We used pretty much legal notice in the paper, but I think in hindsight, we probably should have rerun those ads before the meetings.
Right, we can help you with that process.
When we get into the IR, even though we did have got some pretty good comments that night from the people that did show up, some of your staff, but when we get into the EIR, I think we'll try to find that the community's helping us get the word out better. Generally,
in Vacaville, we take the standard legal notice, put it in the paper, and then we do a 600-foot radius from the property line. So I would encourage you to try to use the procedures we follow. That way, it doesn't look like we're not letting people know about what could possibly happen. So that would be my comment.
I have a couple of questions,
sure.
if I could. First, earlier you talked about the reduction in population that we've seen at the prison to date. I believe you said 900 inmates and 600 inmates respectively?
900 and 200. 200 at the medical facility
200
and about 600 at the, 900 at the
So
Sol.
900 altogether, or?
No, it would be about, it would be 1,100.
1,100 altogether, okay, 1,100 altogether. What's the rated capacity for those two facilities?
I do not know off the top of my head. Do not know. Vacaville, of course, is the medical facility is very old, so it probably never had one in terms of an EIR entitlement. The Solano was very early, 1984, so I'm not sure there once again.
What I was getting at is how far above their rated capacity were they, and in the reduction of 1,100 inmates, does that just bring them in line with what their rated capacity would be? The reason I ask that is because the rated capacity is based on the previous EIR, and the previous EIR is based on the city and their ability to support the different functions within the prison. When I say that, I mean the sewer, the water, and those types of things. So if we're talking about just bringing it back in line with its rated capacity, we're talking about bringing the prison back in line with where it should be with regard to capacities and flows and things that affect the city and the city's cost. So if we're going to add 700 inmates to that, then we need to make sure that, one, we're already complying with the EIRs that we have in place for the existing facilities, and two, what are the impacts going to be as a result of that, and can we actually support them as a city? The trunk line for the Foxborough neighborhood is already at capacity. I mean, and that's a, mile-and-a-half long line that runs all the way out to the plant out there. To replace a line of that size is going to cost more than this entire facility would cost to be done. So there are impacts that may be prohibitive to the project just right off the bat. The second is in the JPA, and the compliance of the state with the JPA that exists already with the city with regard to and I'm just repeating what I've heard from the neighborhood down there. The minute this came out, a lot of people that I know live in that neighborhood, and when they saw that map and said, wow, that's, as the mayor said, really close to these houses, they already hear when you guys make announcements in the yard. They already see the lights all night long. That's at a distance of about, I don't know, I would say about 900 feet from where they live. So at a distance of 300 feet from where they live, that makes a big difference. One of the key issues that we went through last time, you spoke about the previous entitlement with regard to putting the reentry facility there, was that the landscaping that sits at the front of those facilities was supposed to be maintained and supposed to be put in place in order to mitigate that. To my knowledge, other than the planting of some oleanders and some trees 20 years ago, that has not been done. And it causes an issue right now with people driving down Peabody Road. When I say that, what I mean is the palm trees that shed, the trees that lose pieces and parts into the street. And so we might need to look at maybe working on what we have now and fixing that before we start to talk about an entitlement to do a whole other project.
Yeah. Again, Deborah Heisen with CDCR. This issue did come up in the reentry, the landscape median, and we had talked to the prison warden at the time to say we need to make sure that we maintain that landscape medium. I think the warden's changed hands since that time, so we've made a note to go back and talk to the warden to make sure that they keep that landscape area consistent with the agreement that's been reached. I want to talk a little bit about the infrastructure issue. Most of our prison's infrastructure has been sized to accommodate 200% of the original population that was planned, and so most of our infrastructure has been able to handle the level of population. And of course, it's going to be one of the things that we study, because if there isn't the capacity to support this growth, then it doesn't make sense for us to go there. So we're clearly going to study that. We're going to clearly work with your Public Works Board Director and others to make sure that we're in sync on those issues. So we will certainly address that.
And I have one last question.
Yeah, for me or for Bob?
I don't know which of you will be able to answer this. Hopefully there's an answer out there. And the last is the impact to our local hospitals. Right now, as far as critical care goes, you guys have the ability to provide care at the at CMF for certain things, but critical care, specifically ICU, when your inmates who are an aging population, specifically in CMF, end up in our critical care unit, that takes very valuable beds that we can't give to then our public, who have to go out of the city because they're now an inmate in that bed. And we have a limited number of those. So when we consider the EIR, that's one of the impacts that we need to consider. The other is the calls for service for our ambulances in the city to transport those folks. We need to make sure that we can also support that.
Yeah, it's clearly a concern we hear from all the cities that we're in. We still are working with the healthcare receiver staff to determine which of the inmates that are at the CMF facility are going to move to the new Stockton facility. So trying to understand what level of acuity remains at CMF once Stockton is open is still part of something we're working on with the receiver's office.
Thank you. Other than that, I absolutely support jobs and construction. I'm doing that right now in my other job. So,
well, thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, I don't want to sort of tell the state how to do the business, but I do think that you have two proposed preferred sites, and I'd imagine the circumstances would have to be pretty significant for those sites to drop out. It's a little, I don't think we want to get sort of excited about jobs or excited about building this thing, because to me, for us to move up the ladder, the circumstances, quite frankly, would have to be pretty compelling. And I would imagine that given the differences in the communities, it's not likely, frankly, that we're going to be moving up the ladder. My preference would be that you study those two, and if those two fall out, then come back to us, because I don't see us as having really much of a shot at this, to be honest with you, given some of the constraints that we have, given the positioning that you've recommended putting this so close to the road. It seems to me that, yeah, I guess it's part of your procedures, but frankly, from a taxpayer's point of view and a person who spends state taxes, I'd rather you just study the first two sites and see if those drop out first. You've already proposed sites. You've obviously felt like there's some conditions in those sites that have elevated them above the others. It seems to me you ought to just do those sites, and if there's some compelling reason, do the others from a financial point of view. But if you decided to do this, I'd have some strong questions. I happen to be the one that sat on the council when we had a capacity issue with our wastewater treatment plant, and it was with CMF, and it really created a lot of animosity between us and the correctional field, and to the point that we actually ended up having to talk to the secretary directly about that. And it wasn't until the prison decided to change some things that we were able to operate our tertiary water treatment plant in an effective way. So frankly, I guess my thought is, yeah, it'd be great, but I don't want anyone to get excited about this, because frankly, I don't think we're in the running, quite honestly. That's my thoughts.
I'd also have one final comment, Bob, on realignment. I mean, we still don't know how that's going to work, if the locals are going to get their money or not. And that's going to be a big deal. I'll believe it when I see it personally. But I hope it all works out. It just seems like they've transferred a lot of inmates to county jails, and if we don't get paid for it, we're all going to be hurting. I know that's not in your realm of fixing or anything. I'm just
we appreciate your
spouting off.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Well, thank you for letting us come before you.